My name is Maya. For 23 years, I thought I was living a life built on solid ground. I had a beautiful home, two wonderful teenage daughters, Tanya and Ria, and a husband, Rajib, whom I considered my rock. But that ground shattered into a million sharp pieces the day I discovered Rajib's 4-year-long double life. Rajib was 49, and the woman he was seeing was only 20, barely older than our eldest daughter. The betrayal wasn't just an affair, it was a parallel universe. This woman had given birth to twins just months before I found out. My world collapsed. My daughters, once full of admiration for their father, turned into shells of themselves, their hearts hardened by the realization that the man they looked up to was a complete stranger. We were in the middle of a messy, agonizing divorce when the unthinkable happened. Rajib and his mistress were killed, instantly in a horrific car accident while driving back from a weekend getaway. By some miracle, the twins, who were strapped in the back, survived without a scratch. Now Rajib's family and the mistress's relatives are all pointing their fingers at me. They are demanding that I take these infants into my home and raise them as my own. They preach about Christian values and being the bigger person, but my soul screams in protest. Why should I be the one to pay for the sins of a man who tried to destroy me? How can I look at those children every day and not see the face of the betrayal that murdered my happiness? The pressure began almost immediately after the funeral. Rajib's parents are elderly and live in an assisted living facility. They lack the physical and financial means to raise two infants. On the other side, the mistress's family is scattered and uninterested, viewing the babies as a burden they didn't ask for. Suddenly, I became the target of everyone's expectations. My mother-in-law, a woman who once treated me like a daughter, now looks at me with cold, demanding eyes. She says, "Maya, these babies are Rajib's blood. They are innocent. You have the room, you have the money, and you are a mother. It is your duty." But where was her sense of duty when Rajib was draining our girls' college funds to buy jewelry for his mistress? Where was her morality when Rajib tried to evict me from our family home, a home my own father had helped us buy? Tanya and Ria have made their positions crystal clear. They told me that if those babies enter this house, they will leave and never look back. They see the twins as a living insult to our family. Even my own mother has turned against me, whispering that good women endure and forgive. She forgets that Rajib didn't just cheat. He systematically abused me emotionally during the final months, trying to make me believe I was the one going crazy. Taking in these children isn't an act of kindness. It would be an act of self-destruction for me and my daughters. The situation reached a boiling point during a lunch meeting I was forced into with my in-laws. They chose a public restaurant hoping I wouldn't make a scene. My mother-in-law was trembling with rage, accusing me of having a heart of stone. She even tried to lung at me across the table, stopped only by my father-in-law. I sat there, unnervingly calm, and looked her in the eye. I told her, I am not the one who was selfish. Rajib was. He is the one who brought children into this world while betraying his wife. The mistress was selfish. She knew he had a family and chose to proceed anyway. I will not set myself on fire to keep these children warm. I stood up and walked out. But the harassment didn't stop. A few days later, I found out that my in-laws had contacted my daughters behind my back. They told Tanya and Ria that they would have to move to a public school and get part-time jobs so that I could afford the best private education for the new siblings. This was the final straw. They weren't just asking for help. They were trying to dismantle my daughters' lives to build a future for Rajib's illicit children. I realized then that I wasn't fighting a family. I was fighting a cult of entitlement that believed my life belonged to them. I decided to take legal action to protect my peace. My in-laws had filed for grandparents' rights, but they weren't just looking for visitation. They were suing for a portion of the house and for my daughters to be legally mandated caregivers for the twins. They actually had the audacity to suggest that my 16-year-old and 14-year-old should spend their weekends and evenings as free labor for infants they despise. Thankfully, my lawyer, a sharp woman named Sarah, laughed at the absurdity of their filing. However, a new twist arrived when the mistress's sister contacted me. Unlike the others, she was remorseful. She met me to return a box of items Rajib had taken from our home and given to her sister. Inside, I found my own wedding sari, my grandmother's antique jewelry, and several of my personal bank statements. Rajib hadn't just cheated. He had been stealing from me for years, providing his mistress with a life funded by my inheritance. I also discovered that the mistress had been using my identity to open credit cards, racking up thousands in debt in my name. The depth of the depravity was staggering. Every time I thought I had reached the bottom of Rajib's lies, a new trapdoor opened. The emotional toll began to manifest in my own household. My mother, continuing her campaign of traditional forgiveness, started showing up unannounced, bringing baby clothes and placing them in my guest room. She argued that if I had been a more submissive wife, Rajib wouldn't have looked elsewhere. This archaic victim blaming was the nail in the coffin for our relationship. I had to make the painful decision to cut her off financially and stop taking her calls. Meanwhile, in the courtroom, the mediator discovered that my in-laws had lied on their affidavits. They had claimed Tanya and Ria were only 4 and 6 years old to make the caregiver argument more plausible to a judge who might not look closely at the records. When I presented the actual birth certificates, the judge was livid. Their blatant attempt to exploit my daughters backfired spectacularly. They were trying to manufacture a tragedy where I was the villain, but the documentation proved they were the ones willing to lie and manipulate children to get their way. It was a small victory, but the war was far from over. Battleground then shifted to our local community and our church. My mother-in-law, a prominent member of the congregation, posted a sprawling, tear-filled essay on the church's public Facebook group. She painted me as a wicked woman who was abandoning innocent orphans to the foster care system while living in luxury. She omitted the fact that Rajib's life insurance and personal savings, which were substantial, had all been left to her and the twins. She wanted my money and my labor on top of what she already had. The backlash was immediate. Members of the church began to harass my daughters at the grocery store, calling them unchristian and shameful. Tanya came home sobbing after a group of older women cornered her and told her she would go to hell for not accepting her brother and sister. That was the moment I stopped being the bigger person. I spent the entire night printing out hundreds of copies of Rajib's secret chat logs, photos of him and the mistress in compromising positions, and the financial records showing his theft of our daughter's college funds. I created a dossier titled, "The Truth About Rajib's Double Life." The following Sunday, I didn't hide. I walked into that church during the morning service with my head held high. While the pastor was preparing for the sermon, I and a few trusted friends placed the dossiers on every single pew. As the service ended and people began to flip through the pages, the atmosphere changed from judgment to absolute shock. The photos left nothing to the imagination, and the financial spreadsheets proved Rajib was a thief, not a martyr. My mother-in-law had told everyone that the mistress was a surrogate. I had hired because I was barren, another lie she had concocted to save face. When the congregation saw the truth of the sordid affair, the gasps were audible. My in-laws, realizing their web of lies had been shredded in front of their entire social circle, fled the building. They were no longer the grieving grandparents. They were exposed as enablers of a liar. The harassment of my daughters stopped instantly. People who had insulted us were suddenly looking at their shoes when we walked by. I realized that silence only protects the guilty. By speaking the truth, I had finally reclaimed our family name from the filth Rajib had dragged it through. By the end of that month, news reached me that a distant cousin of Rajib's had stepped forward to adopt the twins. This cousin was a kind, stable woman who lived several states away and genuinely wanted to provide a home for the children. She contacted me privately to apologize for the behavior of Rajib's parents and assured me that I would never be bothered again. She understood that those children were a trigger for my trauma and that I had every right to distance myself. For the first time in months, I felt like I could breathe without a weight on my chest. Tanya and Ria began to smile again. We decided to put our house on the market. Every corner of that building was haunted by Rajib's ghost and his infidelities. I needed a space that he had never touched. I officially finalized the legal proceedings to remove his name from all our assets, treating the process as if he were a business partner who had committed fraud. I even had his epitaph changed. I couldn't stand the lie of beloved husband and father on his grave. I had it replaced with a simple stone bearing only his name and dates. He didn't deserve a legacy he hadn't earned. This journey taught me an invaluable lesson. Family is not defined by blood, but by loyalty and respect. My real family turned out to be my lawyer, my few loyal friends, and even the mistress's sister, who showed more integrity than my own mother. My mother continued to send letters of advice, but I realized that her version of womanhood was a cage I no longer wished to live in. We started family therapy, just me and my girls. We sat in a room with a professional and unpacked the anger, the betrayal, and the grief. We learned that it's okay to be angry at a dead person. We learned that we aren't bad for wanting a life free of Rajib's mistakes. We discovered that the twins were not our responsibility, and that choosing our own sanity over a toxic obligation was the most moral choice we could make. We began packing our lives into boxes, not with sadness, but with the excitement of an adventure. We were leaving the town that judged us and moving to a place where we could be whoever we wanted to be. The move was cathartic. We found a beautiful modern home in a different state, close to the mountains. In this new city, no one knew the scandal. No one whispered behind our backs at the supermarket. I started a new job in a senior management position, and for the first time in years, I was recognized for my intellect, rather than my status as Rajib's wife. Watched my daughters blossom. Tanya joined the debate team, finding her voice in a way she never had before. Ria took up painting, expressing her emotions through vibrant, bold colors. We made a pact never to let a man or anyone make us feel small again. I realized that Rajib's death, as tragic and messy as it was actually my liberation. It forced me to see the world as it was, not as I wanted it to be. I was no longer a victim of a cheating husband. I was the architect of my own future. The twins were being raised by a loving family who wanted them, and I was raising my daughters in a home built on truth. A year passed, and the peace we found was profound. One morning, Tanya asked me if I ever regretted my choice. I sat her down and explained that regret is for things you could have changed. I couldn't change Rajib's choices, and I couldn't change the fact that those babies existed. But I could change our reaction to it. I told her that by saying no to the pressure, I was saying yes to her and her sister. I was showing them that a woman's life is not a dumping ground for other people's errors. We looked at our old life like a movie we had watched a long time ago. The pain was still there, but it was like a scar on the skin. It didn't hurt anymore. It just reminded us of where we had been. I had even managed to forgive my mother, though from a distance. I understood that her era had taught her to endure, and she simply didn't have the tools to understand my strength. I moved her into a comfortable retirement home, fulfilling my duty without letting her poison my daily life. The mistress's sister, Sarah, eventually visited us. She told us the twins were thriving with the cousin. She also told us that Rajib's parents had become bitter and isolated, their health failing because they had no one left to blame. I felt a momentary pang of pity, but it was quickly replaced by the memory of the slap my mother-in-law tried to give me at that restaurant. You cannot treat people like servants and expect them to care for you when you are old. I realized that my life was now a fortress of my own making. I had built a career, raised two strong women, and maintained my integrity. I started dating again, but with a new set of rules. I looked for partners who valued transparency above all else. I found a man named David, who had also been through a difficult divorce. We didn't rush into anything. We built a foundation of friendship. He respected my boundaries and adored my daughters. For the first time, I saw what a healthy partnership looked like. Looking back at the 23 years I spent with Rajib, I see them as a school of hard knocks. I learned everything I needed to know about what I don't want in a life. I learned that intuition is a gift that should never be ignored. Every time I felt something was wrong during those 4 years he was cheating, I was right. I promised myself I would never silence my inner voice again. My daughters see this strength in me, and it has made them fearless. They don't look for validation from boys. They look for it within themselves. Tanya is now heading to law school, specializing in family law. She wants to help women who are in the same position I was. Ria is an art major, her senior project being a series of portraits titled The Unbroken. My heart swells with pride every time I see them. We are the survivors of a storm that was meant to drown us. But instead, we learned how to sail. The fire I built that night, when I burned Rajib's wedding sari and the photos of his mistress, felt like a holy ritual. As the smoke rose into the air, I felt the last of the anger dissipate. Anger is a heavy burden to carry, and I was tired of being tired. I decided to live for the living, not the dead. I established a small scholarship in our new town for single mothers, returning to school. I wanted to turn my pain into something productive. My life is now filled with the things I love: books, travel, deep conversations with my daughters, and a quiet morning coffee without the fear of a hidden phone ringing. Rajib's death was a period at the end of a long, painful sentence. Now I am writing a new book. It's a book about a woman who chose herself, and in doing so, saved her children. It's a story of resilience that I hope will inspire others who are trapped in the shadows of someone else's lies. As I sit on my porch today, watching the sunset over the mountains, I feel a deep sense of contentment. The twins are growing up far away, healthy and loved by a mother who chose them. My daughters are thriving, healthy and loved by a mother who chose them. And I am happy, healthy and loved by a woman who chose herself. There is no perfect ending to a story of betrayal, but there is a peaceful one. I found my peace not by doing what society expected, but by doing what was right for my soul. Rajib is a name on a stone, a memory that is fading with every passing day. My future is a blank canvas, and I have all the colors I need to make it beautiful. To anyone standing where I once stood, don't let them tell you that you are cruel for protecting your heart. You are not a villain for refusing to carry a burden you didn't create. You are a hero for surviving. The sun is setting on my past, but it is rising on a life that is truly, finally, mine. Thank you for walking this path with me.